So just when I thought I was done making videos about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera, Blackmagic goes and drops the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. That's right, 6K. What's good, creative fan? Brandon Washington here. First of all, if you're brand new to the channel, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button because this channel is all about filmmaking gear, tips, and tutorials. But as I said before, today we are taking a look at the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. Now, as the time of shooting this video, Blackmagic just announced this camera yesterday, and I am super pumped. Now, as a lot of you guys may or may not know, here on my channel, I've been doing a lot of videos on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K because this has quickly become my favorite video camera to shoot with. Whether I'm shooting for my YouTube channel or I'm shooting for client work, this has definitely become my new go-to camera for a lot of reasons, and there are a ton of videos to explain all those. But in today's video, like I said, I wanted to talk about this, but now in 6K. So the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, which from now on I'm going to be calling just the Blackmagic 6K, sports a super 35mm sensor that shoots full 16:9 in 6K. Now it shoots that at up to 50 frames per second, and it still retains its 13 stops of dynamic range and its dual native ISO. Now it can shoot 6K at up to 60 frames per second, but it's gonna do it in an aspect ratio that's actually more of like a 17:9, so it's a little bit more of a wider frame of view, but you can shoot 60 frames per second in 6K. And then probably one of the biggest updates to this camera is the fact that it is no longer a micro four thirds mount, but it is actually a Canon EF mount. That's right, a Canon EF mount directly on this camera. So no adapters or speed boosters needed. Now, initially, there are some immediate benefits when shooting in 6K. One of the biggest ones is now you can actually shoot in 6K, but develop in a 4K timeline and be able to actually reframe your shot in post, which is one of the huge benefits and one of the reasons why I primarily put all my videos in a 1080 timeline is because I shoot all my stuff in 6K and then I reframe in a 1080 timeline so I can recrop and do other things. But now when shooting in 6K, you can do that with a 4K timeline. The other big benefit when shooting in 6K is the fact that your actual digital noise will be smaller in a 4K or 1080 timeline. So that's right. So if you're shooting a scene and there's a lot of noise in it and you shoot it in 6K, but then you actually put it in a 1080 timeline or a 4K timeline, that noise will actually look smaller and it won't be as noticeable in your shot. And then on top of that, when shooting in 6K, you're also just future-proofing your footage. Today, we're getting to the point where 4K is kind of becoming the norm. It's on a lot of cell phones. TVs in 4K are becoming a lot cheaper. But by shooting in 6K, you're now allowing yourself to future-proof your footage, so that way you don't have to worry about that in the next 3 to 5 years, hopefully. So yeah, so the benefits of that are great, but now what are some of the benefits with this new mount and new sensor? Well, first of all, with this brand new sensor, it is a super 35mm sensor, so a little bit bigger than the micro four thirds. What that's going to allow you to do is, for one, you're going to have a greater shallow depth of field. Now, on my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, I use a speed booster, which is really helpful for getting a wider frame of view and also letting in more light. But it doesn't help with the overall size of the sensor, so it doesn't help with things like shallow depth of field. But with having a super 35mm sensor, you're gonna have a greater shallow depth of field, something more so used to being seen in film and movies. So if you even don't have a lens that has like a really low aperture, you can still get that shallow look. And one of the other big benefits with that new mount is that it is an EF mount. So what that's gonna give you is more lens selection. Now, when shooting on micro four thirds, there are a lot of good lenses out there, but it doesn't compare to all the amazing lenses that come out for EF. Most cinema lenses are gonna come out on either PL or EF for sure, and that's because a lot of cameras use the EF mount system. On top of all those cinema lenses, you also have access to all the Canon EF photography lenses. And that's not just from Canon themselves. Sigma and Tokina, they make some lenses. Rokinon also makes lenses, all having EF mounts. So now your selection of lenses have just got much wider and you have more opportunity to find the right lens for your camera. So with all these great things, what are the things I'm most excited about with this camera? Well, obviously it starts with that 6K sensor, that super 35mm sensor. I'm pumped to start shooting on that thing. The other thing that I'm excited about with this camera is the fact that they didn't go in and try to change things that didn't need to be fixed. I mean, for example, I love all the IO ports on this camera and they did not mess with any of those. They're all the exact same. Also, the big 5-inch touchscreen on the back, they didn't mess with that, so that still works. The button placement, which in my opinion is flawless, they didn't mess with any of that stuff. So really, they just went in and upgraded the camera in the ways that I personally think they should have, and they didn't mess with anything else, allowing it to still function like the great camera that it already is. And then of course, I know I haven't mentioned it, but the price on this camera is absolutely just mind-blowing. I mean, the fact that this camera comes in just shy of $2,500 for 6K, not to mention it does shoot 6K in RAW, is just unbelievable. I mean, they are really hammering the industry right now with that quality for price value. Now, as exciting as this camera is, there are a couple things that I am a little concerned with. The first being battery life. Now, they did not change the type of battery that this camera uses, which I kind of appreciate because I've already invested in a lot of the Canon LP batteries. But I know with this camera here, when I shoot in 4K, I don't get a whole lot of record time. And I'm worried that now shooting in 6K, I'm gonna probably run into an even worse issue. Another thing that I'm a little concerned about with the new camera is the fact that if you want to shoot in that full 6K and the 16:9, is that it only records in 50 frames per second. Now, I almost never shoot anything in 50 frames. If I'm going to do slow motion, I almost always do 60. So I'm a little, interested to see how that's going to look. They have some test footage over on their website that I looked at and it looked great, but I'm a little worried about, what that's going to actually look like in true practicality. And then the other thing I'm a little worried about is obviously the file size. I mean, this thing does pretty good with 4K, but going up to 6K, you're going to be dealing with some massive files. I've already started investing in more hard drives, but I will say that that's definitely not something that's going to turn me away from it. It's definitely not a deal breaker. It is just something to consider about with this new camera. So you can probably guess and tell already, am I going to upgrade or am I going to buy this new camera? Yeah, I've already ordered it. I mean, the second I saw it, looked over the specs, I ordered this camera immediately. I am so excited about this new Blackmagic 6K pocket camera. I can't wait to get my hands on it. But I know a lot of you guys are probably sitting there wondering like, well, if you've got the 4K, is it worth upgrading to the 6K? Or maybe you're in a boat where you're like, well, I don't have the 4K yet. I've been thinking about ordering it, but now with this 6K, I don't know, like, what should I do? Should I get the 6K? Should I get the 4K? Well, I'll tell you this. I'm not 100% sure, but I'll definitely let you guys know in a future video. Since I've actually already ordered mine, right now, B&H is saying that it'll be here on Monday, which is completely nuts. I can't believe they're actually going to ship it out that soon. I hope it comes that soon, but it's hard for me to really, bet anything on it because Blackmagic in the past has been kind of known for being a little late on getting their cameras out. But ultimately, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But thank you guys so much for checking out this video. If you have any questions about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K or 6K, definitely leave those down in the comments so I can update those in future videos. On top of that, if you guys want to know how I feel about this camera, look at some of my coverage over the 4K version of this camera. Definitely check out some of my other videos because they should be super helpful. But again, thank you guys so much for watching this video and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.